Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill, where it's another big day for Democrats and Republicans. But before we get to that, Nancy, I want to talk about Secretary Clinton's speech from last night. We heard her urge the crowd to stay engaged. Did any part of that speech hint at what she's planning next? I mean, as a sort of a senior leader of the Democratic Party.
Not really, beyond the fact that obviously she wouldn't be pushing them to stay engaged unless she intends to stay engaged as well. The fact that Hillary Clinton lost doesn't mean that she suddenly becomes persona non grata within the Democratic Party. She is still widely admired. She's still a very valuable voice within this party. And so I think that she still needs to figure out exactly what role she wants to play, what kind of influence she wants to have, whether she does that through the Clinton Foundation or some other way. She would certainly be welcomed back into a very high-profile role by a lot of Democrats that I've spoken to here on Capitol Hill. But in that speech, she really didn't give any indication of what that role would look like.
Nancy, we know House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi held her weekly news conference this morning. You were actually there. Let's take a listen to what she said.
As of right now, I know you're still examining it, but what do you think the main factors were in Hillary Clinton's surprise defeat? And do you think that Rudy Giuliani has financial conflicts of interest that should be considered?
I believe that the Comey letter was a foul deed. It was a wrong thing to do. I have had great admiration for Director Comey. I think that he just couldn't take the heat. I think there should be an investigation, and we'll figure out how to call for that, of how Giuliani knew 2 days before that something was coming. It has been the practice of prosecutors and U.S. attorneys historically not to release that kind of information, even when they think it's significant, so close to an election. And Director Comey said, I don't know if this is significant. It really just changed everything. And the same Comey who said he didn't want to put his name on the consensus intelligence appraisal that the Russians were hacking, the Russians were the hackers of the Democratic committees and Hillary Clinton's campaign, because he didn't want to, it was too close to the election for him to sign a consensus intelligence document. So something is not right in this picture. And I think the American people deserve an investigation into how a foreign government had an impact on our election.
Nancy, I'm curious what you made of her response, and is there any buzz about some sort of a movement to look into Russia's involvement during the election?
Well, the challenge is that, and as Pelosi well knows, Republicans control the House and the Senate, so it's unlikely that they're going to be launching investigations anytime soon into an action by James Comey that ended up benefiting them, or an action by the Russians that also potentially ended up benefiting them. So we've gotten no indication at this point that this is something that the Republicans are eager to investigate. In fact, after Nancy Pelosi spoke, Paul Ryan held his weekly press conference, and I asked him whether he believes that it is a conflict of interest for Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to take a role within the White House, if he thought that perhaps that violated nepotism rules. And Ryan essentially said he doesn't really know the nepotism rules, but that Kushner was a very valuable advisor to Donald Trump. This is the same Paul Ryan who had deep concerns about Hillary Clinton's potential conflicts of interest in the White House with the Clinton Foundation, for example. And so it does seem that Republicans are trying to give Donald Trump a very wide berth and essentially turning the other cheek when it comes to some of the conflict of interest issues that are already arising in his nascent administration.
And that's sort of, I think, what a lot of people find fascinating, Nancy, that the Republicans were very, very tough on Secretary Clinton with regards to the Clinton Foundation and some of the conflicts that may have potentially arisen because of the foundation. And had she been elected president of the United States. And yet Donald Trump's business dealings span multiple countries and multiple different businesses. He's been very, very tough on China, but a lot of his, or at least some of his goods are manufactured in China, for example. And so I wonder if that's something that we're going to continue to see from House Republicans, sort of this sort of turning a blind eye to some of those dealings as we move forward.
Yes, I think you will see that as long as they can possibly do that, because they have no interest in hurting their new president-elect. You know, when it comes to business conflicts of interest, you'll recall that Donald Trump said when he was in debates and interviewed that the way that he was going to get around that was by putting his children in charge of the businesses, and that he wasn't going to talk to them about the businesses, which, you know, already had some problems. But then when you talk about his son-in-law then coming to work in the White House, it makes it pretty clear that there really isn't any way to draw those lines between Donald Trump and his family and the business. So Republicans are going to have to figure out if this is something that is truly a concern to them, and if so, are they going to try to go through back channels to express it to the Trump administration, or will they do something more publicly? At this point, there is no appetite to do something more publicly, in large part because there's really no sign that there's anything that they could do about it. I mean, his businesses are his businesses. There's no way to really put them in a blind trust the way that past presidents have put their investments into a blind trust, and we're kind of in uncharted territory because we haven't had a businessman in modern times take over the Oval Office.
Mike Pence, we know, Nancy, had a meeting with House Republicans today. He made some remarks. I want to play a clip from that. Let's listen to it.
Very humbling to be back among my former colleagues. We're excited about moving the Trump agenda forward in the coming Congress, and I'm just so grateful. So grateful for the warm hospitality and all of their determination to work with our incoming administration to make America great again.
Governor, talk a little bit about your relationships here in the Congress. What has it meant to you? What's it going to mean for the incoming Trump administration?
It's just very humbling to me to be back in the room. I spent 12 years as a member of Congress, and to be there with members I served with many men and women who have been elected to Congress since then, and to see the enthusiasm for the president-elect's agenda for this country.
Governor,
I'm just
what
very
is item
confident
one on that agenda?
Very confident that as we move toward inauguration, bring together a great team, work in concert with leaders in the House and the Senate, we're going to move an agenda that's going to rebuild our military, revive our economy, and in a word, make America great again.
Governor, are you relishing? Thank you.
So, Nancy, what can you read from the tea leaves from this meeting?
Well, I mean, Republicans are thrilled to have Mike Pence back in the fold. He was a popular member of the Republican conference when he was here on Capitol Hill for 12 years. He's very good friends with Speaker Ryan and other members of leadership. In fact, at his weekly press conference, Speaker Ryan just mentioned President-elect Pence, and then he stopped and said, wow, that feels really good, rolling off the tongue, yeah. President-elect Pence. And so while there are a number of Republicans who had their doubts about Donald Trump, including Paul Ryan, and expressed them publicly, at least during the elections, if not now, they never expressed those kinds of concerns about Pence. And I think that there is an expectation that he will be the one who's doing a lot of communicating with Capitol Hill. And, you know, that members from both sides are trying to give this administration the benefit of the doubt. Even Vice President Biden, who met himself with Pence, said last night that he's a fine man and he's looking forward to talking with him further.
Nancy Cordes on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Nancy.